Have you ever noticed that the deeper you think, the more distant you feel from everyone around you? That the more you see through illusions, the harder it becomes to connect? It's a quiet paradox, the gift of perception that feels more like a burden. But it isn't just imagination. History, psychology, and even neuroscience suggest that deep thinkers often find themselves walking a lonely path. Not because they reject the world, but because the world quietly rejects them. The uncomfortable truth about thinking deeply. Throughout history, society has admired intelligence, in theory. We celebrate innovation, worship genius, and quote philosophers. But in practice, humanity has always feared those who think too deeply. Why? Because deep thinkers don't just ask questions, they ask the wrong ones. The ones that challenge comfort, tradition, and ego. Socrates was executed for corrupting the youth. Galileo was silenced for looking through a telescope. Nietzsche was dismissed as mad for questioning morality itself. And yet, their ideas outlived everyone who ridiculed them. The pattern repeats across centuries. Society adores the thinker after they're gone, when their words no longer threaten the status quo. Why deep thinkers make people uncomfortable. So why does deep thinking provoke resistance instead of admiration? The answer lies not in intellect, but in psychology. When you stand beside someone who is physically strong, you may admire them. Their strength doesn't diminish your own worth. If someone is wealthier, you might feel envy, but you still understand that wealth can be gained or lost. But intelligence is different. When we meet someone who thinks on a level we don't, it challenges our entire sense of identity. It reflects our ignorance. And few things are more painful to the human ego than self-recognition. Psychologists call this the ego mirror effect. A deep thinker doesn't just express ideas. They hold up a mirror that forces others to see their own intellectual limits. And most people don't forgive that reflection. Even if the deep thinker says nothing, their presence alone can create unease, as if their silence carries judgment. It's not arrogance. It's perception. And perception makes people uncomfortable. The social cost of perception. Unlike strength or beauty, which are admired outwardly, intelligence hits close to home. Our thoughts are part of our identity. So when someone's mind moves faster or questions what we take for granted, it doesn't just challenge our ideas. It challenges who we think we are. This is why highly perceptive people often struggle in social settings. They notice patterns others overlook. They detect inconsistencies in logic, hidden motives in conversations, and the subtle tension between what people say and what they really mean. For the deep thinker, this awareness is natural. For everyone else, it's threatening. So, society quietly builds defense mechanisms. Instead of curiosity, it reacts with dismissal. Instead of engagement, it resorts to ridicule. It's easier to label a thinker as weird or pretentious than to confront uncomfortable truths. The tribal instinct. To understand this reaction, we have to go back to our evolutionary roots. For most of human history, survival depended on belonging to a tribe. Rejection from the group meant danger, even death. Our ancestors survived not by being the smartest, but by being the most accepted. And so, our brains evolved to prioritize social harmony over intellectual honesty. When someone introduces a new idea that disrupts group consensus, it's processed as a threat, not a contribution. Neuroscience confirms this. Studies show that when people feel intellectually outmatched, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, activates as if facing physical danger. In short, the brain reacts to challenging ideas the same way it reacts to predators. The thinker becomes an intruder, someone who threatens the delicate balance of social belonging. That's why deep thinkers often feel like outsiders. Not because they want isolation, but because their depth is mistaken for danger. The group effect. Why intelligence feels threatening in public. A 2021 study from Stanford revealed something fascinating. People feel less threatened by intelligence in private than in public. When one-on-one, deep thinkers inspire curiosity. But in a group, they trigger insecurity. Because groups are built on hierarchy. Every conversation, no matter how casual, has a subtle layer of competition for attention, validation, or dominance. When a deep thinker enters that dynamic, their insight disrupts the balance. They don't play the game of status. They play the game of truth, and truth doesn't flatter anyone. As a result, they're quietly excluded, talked over, or ignored, not because of malice, but because the group subconsciously protects its comfort zone. That's why genuine conversations, the kind that leave you changed, usually happen in private, not in crowds. The biases that protect mediocrity. Human cognition is full of shortcuts that protect comfort and identity. Let's look at 3 of them. The Dunning-Kruger effect: the less someone knows, the more confident they feel. Meanwhile, deep thinkers, aware of their own ignorance, often doubt themselves. Status quo bias: people naturally resist change, preferring familiar beliefs even when new evidence contradicts them. The backfire effect: when presented with facts that challenge their worldview, people don't change. They double down. These biases create an invisible shield around mediocrity, protecting shallow thinking from being uprooted. That's why societies can glorify intelligence while rewarding conformity. The truth is rarely comfortable, and comfort sells better than truth ever will. How modern technology amplifies shallow thinking. In the digital age, this conflict has reached its peak. Social media doesn't reward depth, it rewards attention. Algorithms are designed to amplify outrage, simplicity, and certainty. The more extreme or emotional a statement, the faster it spreads. Meanwhile, nuance, the language of deep thinkers, doesn't perform well in 10-second clips. Thoughtful insights can't compete with clickbait. This means the digital landscape doesn't just ignore deep thought, it actively suppresses it. We're living in a time when emotional manipulation travels faster than reason, where opinions are currency and truth is optional. For a deep thinker, this is suffocating, because while the world becomes louder, meaning becomes thinner. The loneliness of seeing too clearly. Philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer and Friedrich Nietzsche both saw intelligence not as a blessing, but as an exile. Schopenhauer argued that most people are guided by the will to live, the instinct to seek pleasure, comfort, and survival. But thinkers are guided by the will to truth, the restless desire to understand, even when it hurts. And truth, more often than not, hurts. When you see beyond illusions, beyond the distractions of wealth, fame, or status, you begin to realize how much of life is driven by emptiness disguised as ambition. Deep thinkers see the absurdity behind what society calls success. They notice the performative nature of social interactions, the polite lies, the empty small talk, the unspoken games of ego and validation. They crave meaning but find that most of the world is built around avoiding it. That's why isolation isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's the natural consequence of clarity, the curse of awareness. The philosopher Émile Cioran once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little that is poor, but the man who has too much awareness." Awareness cuts through illusions, but illusions are what make life bearable for most people. To see too much is to lose the comfort of ignorance. To understand too deeply is to realize how fragile our certainties are. That's why many great minds throughout history have lived lives of solitude or suffering. Not because they failed to fit in, but because they saw too much to pretend. But there's beauty in that tragedy, because awareness, while isolating, is also liberating. It frees the thinker from the invisible chains that bind the rest of society, the need for approval, the fear of being misunderstood, the compulsion to conform. The modern philosopher's dilemma. Today's thinkers face a unique challenge. We live in an age of unlimited information but diminishing understanding. The internet has made knowledge accessible, but it has also flooded it with noise. Deep thinkers are often buried under the avalanche of opinions, forced to translate complex ideas into digestible soundbites just to be heard. And yet, they persist, because truth, once glimpsed, cannot be unlearned. Even if society turns away, the thinker keeps digging. Not for fame, not for approval, but because the search itself becomes a form of meaning. Finding peace in isolation. So what can deep thinkers do in a world that doesn't understand them? First, recognize that isolation isn't failure. It's the space where clarity grows. Great ideas are rarely born in crowds. They emerge in silence, in those long, lonely hours of thought that most people spend running from. Second, understand that not everyone can follow you to the depths you explore. And that's okay. Depth isn't superior to shallowness. It's simply rarer. Finally, seek kindred minds, not many, but a few. People who question, wonder, and refuse to settle for easy answers. Because while deep thinkers may be misunderstood by the majority, they are never truly alone, only scattered. The gift beneath the curse. In the end, the isolation of deep thinkers is both curse and calling. The curse is loneliness. The calling is clarity. And while the world may resist those who think differently, every era depends on them, to challenge, to question, to see what others refuse to see. So if you often feel like your thoughts isolate you, remember this: you are not lost. You are simply walking ahead on a path few have the courage to take. Keep walking. The world may not understand you now, but it always catches up, eventually.